Laura was restless. She paced relentlessly, struggling to calm down. The wedding dress felt like a burden, its weight and awkwardness amplifying her distress. But the real issue was the missing groom. Only 15 minutes remained until the registration, and guests crowded the registry office, waiting. Laura had to maintain her composure, a task that grew increasingly difficult. Her friends were exhausted, whether from high heels or the tiresome waiting. They were eager to start snapping pictures and posting on Instagram. The photographers leading the ceremony shared Laura's nerves, repeatedly asking if everything was all right. As time ticked by, Ethan was still absent. The tension was palpable, and with each passing minute, Fiona and Alexander's faces grew more puzzled. How could someone be late to their own wedding? The bride's mother was the first to voice this. Clearly weary of the wait, her enthusiasm had waned. Moments later, an old Buick as old as Laura pulled up to the registry office. Guests stared in surprise at the young man who stepped out. Dressed in a simple suit and holding a bouquet of 3 chrysanthemums, he was accompanied by a group of people. They seemed slightly younger than Laura's parents, and their outdated attire raised eyebrows. Unfazed, they began ascending the stairs. "Oh, what an interesting costume." "Wedding," someone from Laura's guests shouted. The young man laughed and handed the bewildered Laura the chrysanthemums. "Hi, darling. Sorry for being late." The guests fell silent, watching the unfolding drama. "Ethan, what is this? Is this some kind of surprise?" Laura, suffocating in her tight corset, demanded an explanation. "My love, calm down. This is no surprise. Sadly or fortunately, this is the harsh reality. I fell so in love with you that I couldn't reveal the whole truth immediately. I'm not rich. My parents are simple workers, and I'm just a taxi driver wanting to be your beloved husband." Laura's face flushed with anger. "Ethan, how can you joke with me like this? Is this some hidden camera prank? A test to see if I'd marry a poor groom?" "Laura, wait. There's no catch. No cameras. You professed your love to me yesterday. Has your attitude changed so quickly? Stop kidding around, Ethan. What kind of circus is this? Did you set this up to humiliate me? Well, you succeeded. How did I not see you were a fraud from the start?" "No circus," Ethan's tone grew serious. "Remember our boat ride? You told me you wanted to spend your life with me. At the cafe, I gave you an expensive watch. I bought all that with my hard-earned money. I knew you wouldn't want a modest wedding, so I took out a loan for this event." Laura covered her face and cried silently. The happiest day of her life had become the worst. She had thought she found a considerate, gentle, and wealthy young man, painting her future in bright colors. Her university performance had even suffered, as she naively believed she wouldn't need to find a job immediately after graduation, despite her parents' urging. The groom's financial status had never been in question. He was stylish, drove an expensive car, and had a flat in a prestigious city area. To Laura, this wasn't a lucky break. It was natural. Coming from a well-to-do family and being attractive, why shouldn't she choose a partner of equal status? Ethan tried to embrace her, but Laura pushed him away, seething. "How could you? How could you embarrass me in front of all my relatives on such a day? There would be no wedding." Laura turned away from the guests and walked off. Her stunned parents and the groom's parents exchanged silent, bewildered glances. One of Laura's friends discreetly took out her phone and began filming the unfolding drama. The guests stood frozen, as if turned to stone. It's not every day that one finds themselves in the middle of such a dramatic scene. Laura's father was the first to snap out of his shock. "Daughter, come back. Everything is fine. Anything can happen between a bride and groom." But Laura, no longer hiding her desperate state, burst into tears and ran down the sidewalk. Fiona ran after her daughter, while Alexander sat on the steps of the registry office, lowering his head. Now all eyes were on Ethan. He calmly handed the bouquet of chrysanthemums to his parents and sat down next to Laura's father. "How will you explain all of this?" Alexander asked, turning to Ethan and looking him straight in the eye. "You, dear Alexander, have worked diligently all your life, just like your wife. You gave your daughter the best, but only one thing was missing: honesty and selflessness." "What are you talking about? My daughter is an honest girl. You're the one who lied to her, took her to restaurants, drove her around in expensive cars. But why? If you couldn't afford it, why didn't you tell her yourself? I'm certain if she loved you, it would not have been a problem." You would have achieved everything together with time. Why didn't we see through you, swindler? Laura's father glared at Ethan with hatred. No one doubts your daughter's honesty. But why did she run away when she found out about my situation? I'm not a drug addict, not a drunkard, not a criminal. I earn money through honest work. Yes, the pay may not be big, but it would be enough for us to live on. And you know what? I won't justify myself anymore. I loved your daughter, sincerely. But today I saw with my own eyes that she doesn't need me. She cares about money, the impressions she makes on people, but not me. The guests, while listening to Ethan's confessions, still couldn't understand what was happening. Laura's friends were the most perplexed. Ethan had taken the girl to cafes and restaurants, given her gifts, and now what? Had he suddenly gone bankrupt, or had he been pretending to be rich all along? Nothing was clear. No one moved from the square near the registry office as if they were waiting for something, but didn't know what. Ethan finally stood up and was about to leave when a woman in a bright, colorful dress blocked his path. It was Laura's aunt. Where are you going? Do you think you can disgrace my niece like that and just leave? If you loved her, how could you have arranged this? Look how many guests have been invited. How much effort has been put in. The woman's voice rose to a scream. And why don't you respectable guests ask your beloved niece Laura why she refused to marry a simple working guy? No benefits, so no marriage? Ethan, noticeably getting nervous, responded, Is it shameful that a girl wants to do better in life, and that when children come, she'll have to live on a meager maternity leave? Is this calculation? This is called a reasonable approach. Did she deceive you about something? Was she pretending to be somebody? Ethan wanted to argue, but fell silent. Suddenly, his mother, Emma, approached Laura's aunt and began to speak calmly. You know, Ethan didn't want to shame his future wife. He fell in love so deeply for the first time in his life. And he's not to blame for what happened. Laura is to blame. What are you saying? Is it Laura's fault? Of course, the mother always has a good son, and the daughter-in-law is bad, retorted the aunt. Laura's aunt wasn't ready to back down. We saw Laura with another man at the cafe a month ago, Emma said, stunning Alexander and silencing the angry woman. We were sitting with mutual friends at the cafe. Laura didn't see us, but we overheard her telling the young man that she really loved him and was only marrying Ethan for his money. The guests stood in shock, not expecting such a turn of events. Even Ethan felt uneasy with those words. He gently took his mother by the elbow and tried to lead her away, but Emma wasn't budging. Ethan didn't speak to us for a week, and then he said he would still marry Laura. So we convinced him to take this step to say he's poor. We couldn't have imagined she would behave like that, fleeing from her own wedding. Isn't this proof that she doesn't love our son? She only needs our money. Come on, Mum. Let's go, Ethan said, guiding his mother towards the car. The guests had already begun to disperse, while Laura's father remained in shock, unable to process what had happened. How could I have raised such a daughter? Alexander muttered, lost in his thoughts and actions. All the pleas from his loved ones not to be upset fell on deaf ears. He loved Laura dearly and had looked forward to her happy future, only to see it collapse instantly. 3 months passed since the ill-fated wedding, bringing incredible changes to Laura's family. Alexander suffered a stroke that paralyzed the left side of his body. It was a shock to the once active and hardworking family. Laura's father now spent most of his time in bed. Fiona abandoned the store's affairs, hastily hired a new manager, and devoted herself entirely to her husband's health. Laura, meanwhile, was finishing her final year at university and preparing for her final exams. The string of gloomy events seemed never-ending. Sales at the store began to decline noticeably. Regular customers, not finding the friendly and responsive hostess, started coming in less frequently. Salaries had to be cut, and 2 employees were laid off. Only Fiona's elderly friend and a young woman of 25 remained working at the store, also handling cleaning duties. But even they struggled to maintain a schedule designed for more people. After his daughter's failed marriage, Alexander abandoned all his affairs and started lending money to anyone who asked. He seemed to want to show everyone his generosity and selflessness. But as soon as the store owner was on the brink of life and death, all the debtors vanished. Fiona was overwhelmed. She had never dealt with such matters and didn't have the time now. She spent the last of their money on her husband's rehabilitation. Several close relatives supported the family as best they could, but everyone had their own lives, leaving all the responsibility for Alexander's care on her shoulders. Laura herself never showed interest in her parents' affairs. She was busy with school and then university, or perhaps she had other reasons. Alexander and Fiona didn't want their daughter involved in the difficult trade industry, hoping she'd pursue a prestigious profession different from theirs. However, Laura's plans crumbled instantly. She didn't know how to help her parents and possibly didn't want to. She had no interest in caring for her father or the family business. Laura's close friends seemed to have vanished. They were content with her when she was cheerful, carefree, and financially secure. Now, without money and time, she acted like a victim who had been betrayed and humiliated. Many classmates gossiped, saying, "She thinks she's depressed and a victim." But in reality, she wanted to sit on two chairs, to marry a rich guy and have an affair behind his back. It didn't work out. Everyone blamed Laura for her father's stroke. There was no sympathy from friends or relatives. Ethan, who should have been begging for forgiveness, didn't respond to calls or messages. Even her own mother hadn't spoken to her in days. At the end of June, Laura finally received her university diploma. When she got home, she flopped onto her bed and picked up her phone without a word. "Laura, could you please go get some groceries?" her mother asked from the other room. "Don't you have anything else to say to me?" Laura replied defiantly. "Laura, we haven't had milk or bread in the house for 2 days. So does that mean bread is more important to you than your daughter's diploma?" Everything was the opposite, not so long ago. Her mother emerged from the room, looking very pale. "You know, daughter, I didn't realize what a terrible person I raised. It's painful for me to accept that you are my daughter." "Quite. Did you just call me a terrible person? Are you out of your mind? I graduated just now and got my diploma. So why do I get an errand to the store instead of congratulations? You're almost 23 years old, yet you still think like a child. It was a huge mistake for Dad and me to indulge you and plan your wedding. So are you going to accuse me of being dumped by Ethan now?" "Yes, I'm going to accuse you, and not just of that." Her mother spoke quietly so as not to wake her sleeping husband. "Your behavior caused your father to have a stroke and me to have a pre-heart attack condition. You started an affair knowing that you were going to get married soon. Mom, I've already explained everything to you. I had no relationship with that guy. We just met for business. I couldn't even imagine that Ethan's parents would be there. I'm telling you, for the 1,000th time, I didn't confess my love to that guy. I don't know why Emma told Dad that I did and why you believed her instead of me. The guy wrote to me on Instagram asking if I, as a beginner designer, could advise him on choosing furniture. I naturally agreed. Experience needs to be gained, right? We met, I gave him a few tips, and he decided to thank me by inviting me to our student cafe. We sat, drank coffee, and talked. He started flirting with me. I told him that I was getting married soon, so that he wouldn't expect anything from me. Then he started asking me all sorts of questions, like whether I could love him. I answered no, and I started getting ready to go home. Then he asked me if I could pay for myself. I told him, "Why did you invite a girl to a cafe if you don't have any money?" He started to justify himself, asking, "Why is money so important to you girls? Is that the most important thing in life?" I told him that yes, money is important to me, and my fiancé is very wealthy, which is why I chose him. "Why did money become your top priority?" Laura's mother asked her. "Laura, we didn't raise you in poverty. You had everything you wanted." "Mom, you're being strange," Laura replied. "Money means freedom. Yes, you can't buy everything in life with it, but a good income allows me to work and live the way I want, not like you and Daddy. You've been working from dawn to dusk in your store. If we'd been better off financially, Dad wouldn't have been so upset about the money we invested in that damn wedding." Fiona wanted to get angry at her daughter's words, but suddenly became suspiciously calm. "Your father had a stroke. Not because we spent a lot of money on the wedding. He was very upset to find out what kind of two-faced and selfish daughter he had." "Wow, are you accusing me again?" Laura exclaimed. "At least I was honest with Ethan. He lied to me, whether he was rich or poor. A decent person wouldn't present themselves like that. I value myself, and I don't want to marry any clowns and liars. So there's more to think about who's really two-faced and self-serving. Enough talk, Laura, Fiona said sternly. I won't pity you anymore. Tomorrow morning, we're going to the store, and you'll work as a substitute salesperson until we make a good profit. Me, a salesperson? I don't know how to do that. Have you asked my opinion? Laura protested. I haven't asked, and I won't ask. You haven't even bothered to ask how much it costs to rehabilitate your father in these 2 months. How I pay the salespeople, how I manage all of this. You only think about yourself, her mother said sternly, putting the money on the table and leaving the room. Laura went to the nearby grocery store, overwhelmed with tears. She couldn't imagine being a salesperson, eating a sandwich for lunch, and gossiping with other salespeople. She felt like the end of the world had come to her young and beautiful life, and she would have to forget about her interior design career forever. Who would hire her as a recent graduate with C's in her diploma for such a serious and creative job? She needed to gain experience, but she wouldn't work for free, and she wouldn't earn decent money right away. The next day, Laura and her mother went to the store while Aunt Daisy stayed home to watch over Laura's recovering father. The store was located at the intersection of 2 busy streets, which saved it from closing. Customers always appreciated the quality and variety of goods, but it was difficult to compete with the nearby shopping center. Its generous departments sold clothes of poor quality, but they were cheaper and in great demand. During a family meeting, it was decided to implement a system of discounts for regular customers and consider other marketing tactics. Hello, Fiona. How happy I am to see you, greeted the hostess's friend, who worked as a salesperson in their shop. Hello, Sarah. I brought you a new employee, Fiona pointed at Laura. Sarah, I have only one request for you. Treat Laura not as my daughter, but as an ordinary person who came here to learn everything. All right, I'll teach her everything, said Sarah, smiling. Fiona, while you are here, let me tell you that we sold all the old stock quickly, but the new models are less in demand. The fabric is natural wool, but the color is gray, slightly faded. Not everyone likes it. We haven't sold a single suit this week. Everyone is asking for classic dark gray or black. You should negotiate with the supplier. Order several batches of pants and suits since they are in demand. Laura listened in horror to her mother's conversation with the salesperson. What sizes? What wool fabric? She was a designer herself and studied types of fabric and color combinations. But it was one thing to work in soulless premises and meet clients as necessary, and another to try to please people every day. Laura remembered how deeply uncomfortable she had felt when her mom or dad had boasted in front of every customer and turned into such caring and cute people. The customers left with their purchases and were satisfied, but her parents came home and hardly spoke to each other. As a child, Laura wondered why her parents were so tired. After all, they didn't have the hardest job in the world. And only years later did she understand that any job with people, if done conscientiously, is very exhausting. Is this what my mother wants to teach me, to please everyone? Laura exclaimed, not realizing how she had wandered into the men's clothing section and got lost in shirts and sweaters. Are you choosing something for your husband? A pleasant female voice came from behind her. You know, your beloved man probably will like this cashmere sweater. It's warm, comfortable, and cozy. There are all sizes and 5 colors to choose from. Laura couldn't figure out how to introduce herself. Was she the hostess's daughter or a new employee? I won't bother you. Please choose. When you decide, let me know. I'll come over, the salesperson said. How nice it is, Laura noted to herself. The girl was gorgeous and polite. Her gloomy mood vanished like smoke, and for the first time in her life, she wanted to work as a salesperson. As funny as it sounded, Laura left the men's shirt section and headed towards her mother with enthusiasm. Mom, what should I do? I'm ready to work. Fiona looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her always dissatisfied daughter suddenly took the initiative. Meet my daughter, Laura, but you, Sarah, know her well. And you, Nora, have recently started working. And I haven't introduced you to. The girls looked at each other and laughed. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Nora told the owner that she had mistaken her daughter for a customer and began to offer her men's pullovers. Fiona smiled, observing the interaction between the two girls. She knew Laura had a difficult character and had no illusions about her daughter's work in the store. But these few months, she had accumulated so much fatigue that she decided to let it be. Laura didn't expect everything to turn out this way. Boom, and she became a seller of plus-size clothes. But surprisingly, the girl felt a sudden surge of strength and energy. Laura threw all unnecessary thoughts out of her head and started to learn sales. These are single-breasted jackets. These are double-breasted. These are booklets, fabric jackets. They used to be insanely popular with us. Nora told Laura about the models in the women's clothing department. What's the maximum size for these jackets? We always order tunics and dresses of certain models up to XXXL. Laura's face showed surprise or bewilderment. Well, there are different body types, different women, said Nora. Really? I didn't think plus-size clothes were popular. Well, your parents are smart people, and they wouldn't deal with selling outdated things. Think about it. The sizes of fashionable dresses, blouses, and skirts end at size L. But women of any weight want to look elegant and modern, and men too. We have many regular customers who don't want to lose weight, but want to dress fashionably. It's not our business why they live like that. Our task is to satisfy their needs. And, there are few places in our town where you can find clothes that are both high quality and fashionable in that size. Of course, there are our online stores, but they have long been on our heels. In any case, when a person comes to us, we don't just sell them something heartlessly. We learn about their desires and try to offer options. Yes, our main task is to sell. There's nothing criminal about that. But who, if not a seller, will suggest to a buyer what suits them, what to wear with it, how to combine it? Look, Nora pointed to the women's clothing section. This is a dress with a vest. It seems like just a decorative detail in the dress, but no, it's the basket that balances the proportions between a normal waist and wide hips. While this dress picks a bright scarf, choose a bag, and it will all play out completely differently. Laura listened with an open mouth, her aggressive voice silent, and realized that she had underestimated the work of a clothing store seller and slightly overestimated herself. Nora didn't tell her anything fundamentally new. Laura had an idea of the cuts and correct combination of clothes. After all, in her past life, she followed fashion trends and regularly went shopping with her friends. But Nora opened up a new world to her when she talked about how to talk to the customer without violating subordination, how to please a client so they leave the store satisfied, sometimes without buying anything. I like working here. Really? Nora shared with Laura during lunch. I have a lot of respect for your mother, so I didn't leave with the other salespeople. Not every store owner would sell their jewelry to pay their employees. Yeah, my mom is a strange woman. Laura barely managed to squeeze out the words as she thought to herself. Mom didn't say a word about selling her jewelry. Why do I find out everything from strangers? And really, I didn't even notice that Mom doesn't wear earrings or a ring. I'm a terrible daughter. I am unable to learn properly and earn money or get married. From that day on, Laura didn't just work part-time at the family store. She started trying harder than ever. She worked with Nora for several days and Sarah for several days. Laura only took one day off per week. She served customers, sorted and steamed clothes in the warehouse, dressed mannequins, and monitored the size grid of the most popular models. Most importantly, she took on the responsibility of promoting the store online, which Fiona had previously handled alone. Laura didn't understand marketing or PR, but her strong desire to restore the family business outweighed her doubts. She began actively maintaining the store's social media page, posting photos of clothing, describing product characteristics, and answering customer questions. Fiona saw how hard her daughter was trying, how politely she communicated with customers, and how she learned the intricacies of working with the cash register. Despite the recent sad events in their family, Fiona was happy about this belated adulthood. Laura no longer sent countless voice messages to her friends, endlessly scrolled through her newsfeed, or snorted at every request. She spent her only day off with her father. Fiona regretted insisting on Laura's hasty marriage, not letting her date this guy, and not getting to know his parents. At the time, the marriage seemed like the perfect solution to knock all the nonsense out of her daughter's head and turn her into a serious person. First, there would be responsibility for the family, and then, God willing, for the child. How wrong she was, thinking someone could fix someone else. No, only a person can fix themselves or circumstances. Several more months passed, and Alexander began to gradually regain use of the left side of his body. Full recovery was still a long way off, but this progress was already incredible. Happiness returned to Laura's family. The doctor's efforts and Fiona's care paid off. The woman was thrilled, but also realized with sadness. Would Laura have changed for the better if such trouble hadn't come to their home? One Monday, Laura and Nora were working at the store. The morning was slow, with no customers, yet the girls were picking out outfits for the mannequins and laughing. "Hello, girls." An elderly woman walked into the store and smiled sweetly. "Hello," the salespeople answered almost in unison. "How good that you work from 9. I've had insomnia for a few nights, waking up at 5 in the morning. I didn't know what to do with myself. I decided to go for a walk, find what I need, and calm down. What would make you feel better? A blouse, a dress, or a warm cardigan?" Nora approached the customer and stopped not far from the woman. "You know, I have a problem. I need to pick out a dress for a wedding, size XXL. I already looked for a dress yesterday next to you." The woman nodded toward the neighboring shopping center, "But they offered me all dark colors. Please tell me, what kind of dress styles do you usually wear? What would you like to show off and what to cover up?" The elderly woman laughed. "Oh, girls, at your age, you need to open everything. You're young and slim. At my age, it's better to cover up. I want something light and pleasant. After all, my only grandson is getting married. If you find a dress with a light wrap, I will be happy." The saleswoman showed the elderly woman all the fancy dresses in the store in her size. The shopper looked at everything they offered her with great interest, understanding that the process would be long. Laura decided to have an easy conversation with her. "So your wedding is coming up soon. And is the bride pretty?" "No, still 3 weeks until the celebration, but I like everything to be ready in advance. My grandson's name is Ethan. As for the bride, I haven't seen her yet. I just arrived 3 days ago. I live far from here. My son brought me a plane ticket. He said, 'Mom, you'll celebrate your grandson's wedding and stay with us for a month.' So I came." The woman tried on all the dresses, but couldn't decide which one suited her best. "Girls, I've already tortured you enough. I'm sorry, but I haven't bought anything for myself in so long. There's not much occasion to dress up in old age. My son told me that the wedding will be at the highest level. The bride is from a very wealthy family. We're not rushing you at all," Laura smiled. "It's a good thing the bride is well off. It could mean fewer problems in their married life. Oh dear, money doesn't always guarantee happiness in marriage. Take my son, for instance. He used to be calm and reasonable, but now I don't understand what's happening to him. He's become nervous and agitated. His wife extracts everything she can for a luxurious lifestyle. Emma enjoys the most expensive resorts and high-end clothes. But there's one positive aspect. My grandson is a decent guy. He helps his father with the business and does what he can." Laura's eyes blurred with emotion. "It couldn't be a coincidence. I'll take this one. The pink is refreshing, and the fabric feels pleasant to the touch," the elderly woman decided, looking satisfied in the mirror. Laura felt a pounding ache overcome her. The elderly woman noticed and asked with concern, "Are you feeling okay?" Laura couldn't hide her tears and quietly sobbed. "I'm sorry. I'm just tired." "Don't cry, dear. You'll have your own celebration in life, and you'll get married," the woman comforted her. You know, I was supposed to have a wedding, but it didn't work out because of me." Laura continued to cry. The woman took Laura's hand and said softly, "Don't cry. Let's finish processing my purchase now, and then we'll go outside where you can tell me everything." 10 minutes later, Laura was recounting everything to Ethan's grandmother. That fateful day, her father's stroke, how her mother was dedicating all her energy to caring for him, and how she had taken on a job as a saleswoman to support her parents. "My dear, saying I'm shocked doesn't even begin to cover it," Mrs. Anderson said. "I'm very sorry about your father. But tell me honestly, did you really cheat on Ethan?" "No, of course not." Laura's voice was filled with desperation. "I'm sharing this with you not because I want to get Ethan back. It's too late for that now. He's getting married. I'm just upset that I was slandered in front of all my relatives, friends, and my father, who couldn't handle the shame. My parents always thought I was unserious, and I couldn't convince them otherwise. It was just a ridiculous coincidence. I agreed to go out with someone who needed my designer advice. I didn't see anything wrong with that. Why would I choose the most popular cafe in the city if I were a cheater? Just before the wedding. What's the cafe called? Mrs. Anderson asked. It's just called Pizza. It opened a year ago. It serves delicious food and the prices are reasonable. We call it the Student Cafe because it's always packed with students. Laura, do you still love Ethan? Mrs. Anderson asked, changing the subject unexpectedly. I think I do, though I'm redefining the term love right now. You might wonder why I ran away from the wedding if I loved him. You see, I was preparing for a happy married life with the man I loved. I won't lie and say Ethan wasn't wealthy. I thought that if I married him, I would become financially independent from my parents and live as I wished. Before my father's incident, we had no financial issues. But my parents always talked about how I would need to work hard to become a true professional and live without worry. Now, I understand my parents were right, but back then, I couldn't imagine spending half my life just working towards that. There were so many interesting and new things around me. Your grandson came to the wedding claiming he was completely broke and that we'd live on his salary as a driver. I just didn't expect that. I had boasted about my smart, beautiful, and wealthy fiancé, and then this happened. I know you probably see me as a foolish, selfish person who wanted to improve her lot in life. Maybe that's true, but I'm just so tired. How many thoughts are racing through your head, Laura? But trust me, the key thing is that you've acknowledged your issue. We all slip up. Take my son Ryan, for example, a thriving entrepreneur, yet he's controlled by his wife. He never mentioned this to me. But Laura, our discussion isn't finished. Let's meet again tomorrow morning. I believe my legs brought me to your store for a reason. Ethan's grandmother told Laura. Laura said goodbye and returned to her work, feeling an immense sense of relief. Suddenly, someone called her name. A handsome stranger in a car had pulled up close to the sidewalk and signaled for Laura to get in. She ignored him and continued walking. The stranger got out and ran up to her. Hey, Laura, do you remember me? Hello? No, I don't. What do you want? Wow, calm down. Why so grumpy this morning? I just wanted to talk. I'm one of Ethan's friends, Daniel. I missed your wedding. Ethan filled me in on everything. I've been messaging you on social media, but you haven't replied, so I had to find you in person. Did you know Ethan is getting married soon? I'm happy for him, Laura replied flatly, but he doesn't love his fiancée. His mom is pressuring him into it because things aren't going well for his dad's business, and Amber is the daughter of an influential figure. Initially, he thought she was attractive, but after talking, he realized they had nothing in common. He's not happy with this wedding. There's nothing I can do to help. Let him perform the same act with her as he did with me. Maybe she'll leave him alone too. Laura, I'm serious. You need to tell Ethan you still love him and stop this wedding. He's trapping himself, and I'm trying to save him. Daniel, why do you assume I still love him and want to save him from such a beneficial match? And do you think I'd believe either of you, especially after Ethan's prank at our wedding? This isn't a joke, Laura. Goodbye. Laura turned and walked toward the store. Laura, Daniel called after her. Do you even realize how much Ethan is suffering? He's too proud to call you himself, but he knows he's at fault. A man controls his own destiny, Laura said loudly and walked faster. Emma, dear, could you make me some tea, please? I feel like drinking something. Mrs. Anderson sat in the spacious kitchen, spreading butter on a piece of bread. Of course, but it's surprising. You usually do everything yourself, and now you're asking me. Emma, I just wanted someone to take care of me, like in a cafe. I rarely go to such places. My small town doesn't have many options. What's stopping you from going to a cafe or restaurant? Ryan and I often visit such places. You're right. A woman across the street recommended a cafe. What's it called? Oh, just Pizza. She said it's tasty and affordable. Should I go there? I'm shocked by that advice. It's a youth cafe, always noisy with rude staff. Definitely not. Have you been there, Emma? Once. Thanks for the advice, dear, but now I'm going for a walk. Mom, where are you going? Ryan asked as he saw her leaving. Yes, Sonny, I am. Could you drive me? It's nearby, she replied. Under his wife's watchful eye, Ryan and his mother left the apartment. Mom, I'm starving. I plan to have lunch at home, Ryan said nervously. Don't worry, son. You'll eat in 10 minutes. I wanted to talk to you face to face. Let's sit on that bench over there. I know what this is, Mom. As a former senior investigator, you're going to interrogate me. I used to joke about that, but it's true. The future of my only son and grandchild depends on it. So tell me, why did you ruin Ethan and Laura's wedding? What are you talking about, Mom? You know Laura refused to marry Ethan when he confessed he was poor and worked as a taxi driver, Ryan replied, exasperated. But that's not the whole story. She was also flirting with another man behind Ethan's back before the wedding. We saw and heard it all. And why did you and Emma, who usually dine at upscale restaurants, decide to go to such a cheap youth cafe? Emma called me. I was really surprised to go to such a place, but I didn't say anything. And what a coincidence, finding 2 free tables in a packed cafe. Yes, Mom, we saved our son from that deceitful girl. Now he's marrying a good girl from a respectable and wealthy family. I'll be pleased to be connected to her father. Ryan, why are you so stressed all the time? Your mother is alive, and your son is marrying a good girl. Yet you're on edge. Tell me the truth. Well, if you want the truth, here it is. I invested a large sum into a business and lost it. We barely have enough to cover our debts. And the wedding is coming up. Everything is tough. Why did you give your son an expensive wedding in this difficult time and put yourself in even greater debt? Wouldn't Ethan have understood your situation? No, Mom. Emma thinks if we have a grand wedding, Alexander Bristol's father will think better of us in the future. You know what, my dear? Don't ruin your life and your child's life. It won't end well. It's better to break your dependence on Emma, who manipulates you. By the way, I met Laura by chance yesterday. She works as a salesperson at her parents' store. I can see through people, and I assure you, she's an honest girl who just got a bit confused. Well, Mom, I don't want to listen. Ryan was about to leave. Wait, she explained why she reacted like that and ran away. If your father had surprised me like that, I would have at least hit him with a frying pan. Besides, Laura's father just started recovering from the stroke he got after your mess. If you're saving your money, get a prenuptial agreement instead of making a spectacle. I heard Laura's father is in bad condition, and I'm very sorry. But Ethan offered him money for expenses, and he refused. We thought it would be a good lesson for our son to see who's with him for money and who's with him for love. Maybe you shouldn't test Emma like that. Yesterday, I saw a check fall out of her purse. She bought another leather coat. Now I understand why you have money problems. I could live off that amount for half a year. Mom, let's end this conversation. Stop accusing us. Ethan's wedding will still happen. He's busy preparing for it. Yes, I see. He's so busy, he's turned pale in front of his laptop. He's an IT specialist. That's why he's always on his computer. Okay, do what you know. Go eat. We'll talk tonight. When Ryan left, Mrs. Anderson called a taxi and went straight to the store to meet Laura. She told the girl about her suspicions and convinced her to meet the man Emma claimed she loved. Laura initially refused, but Ethan's grandmother convinced her that this meeting could reveal a serious moral crime and impact the future of Mrs. Anderson's family. And maybe Laura's future depended on it. Despite finding Mrs. Anderson's ideas partly absurd, after an hour of conversation with the charming investigator, Laura's doubts disappeared. After getting a call from Laura confirming the meeting was set, Mrs. Anderson gathered Ryan, Emma, and Ethan in the living room. My dear ones, tomorrow marks exactly 45 years since I started working in the police. I want to invite you all to a restaurant to celebrate. The whole family was seated at a cozy cafe table, enjoying various delicacies. There weren't many people in the restaurant. Conversation flowed smoothly. Mrs. Anderson told Ethan stories about his father Ryan's childhood, his likes and hobbies. Naturally, she also shared some tales of her work as an investigator after having a few drinks. Emma suddenly asked her mother-in-law, "Tell me, where did you get the money for this restaurant? It's a very upscale and costly place." "I'm not offended, just curious." Mrs. Anderson responded with dignity, not at all embarrassed, like my son and grandson. "Don't worry, Emma. We're spending my hard-earned money. I have a good pension, and thanks to my son's regular help, I've saved a decent sum in the bank. This money will be enough for Ryan to pay off his debts and for Ethan not to marry a girl he doesn't love, whom you chose for him." Ethan almost choked on his cocktail at these words. He had only shared his doubts about the marriage with a close friend. How could his grandmother know all this? Ryan was stunned by his mother's honesty and didn't know what to say. Emma was breathing heavily, ready to start a verbal battle. "I've been around long enough to see when someone is pressuring my son. And Ethan, some people solve their problems at the expense of others, but that's not your grandson. I'm sure you're an honest person, but you're influenced by your mother, who buys her 25th Himalayan goat fur coat while the family faces problems. How dare you speak to me like that?" Emma stood up, throwing her crumpled napkin on the table. "Sit down and calm down. Laura, come here," Mrs. Anderson said. To everyone's surprise, Laura and an unknown man appeared. "I invited guests to our wonderful celebration," continued Mrs. Anderson. "A celebration of truth, honesty, and justice. Emma, don't you want to tell us how you arranged the meeting between this young man and Laura? How you booked 2 tables and brought Ryan here?" Emma looked at her mother-in-law and the young man, seemingly ready to take a desperate step. Ethan stared at Laura, overwhelmed with shame. How could he have believed his mother's words and become involved in this shameful scheme? Unexpectedly, the unknown young man spoke up first. "I'm very sorry this happened," he said, looking at Ethan and Ryan with sad eyes. "I just needed money," and then Emma suggested earning some extra cash by provoking emotions and words from Laura. "I would never have come here and kept this a secret if Laura hadn't said that her father had a stroke after the shock at the wedding. Forgive me." The young man lowered his eyes to the floor and left the cafe. Laura stood behind Mrs. Anderson, silently crying. "Why?" Ryan's loud voice broke the long silence. "Why did you lie to everyone, Emma? Why convince everyone that our son's bride was a traitor? And when Ethan didn't believe it, you suggested such a nasty way of testing her. How could I have agreed to this nonsense? I don't want to see you anymore." "Wait, don't jump to conclusions," Laura exclaimed, rushing to the table as if struck by lightning. "Don't argue because of me. I'm not worthy of such sacrifice. Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't appreciate you as I should have. I just didn't expect such a test on my wedding day." She wiped away her tears and headed for the exit. Ethan immediately jumped up and ran after her. "Forgive me, Laura, for my father, for falling for my mother's words about you like a fool. Let's go talk." Laura and Ethan left the cafe, leaving Ryan, his mother, and Emma sitting at the table in silence. According to the genre's laws, I should buy plane tickets and leave immediately. However, since I live far away, please bear with me for a couple more weeks. I swear I don't want to be the cause of your family's breakdown. You may hate and curse me, but please understand, feelings and people's destinies aren't a joke. And I'm not just talking about Laura and Ethan. What about that girl, Crystal, who believes she is loved and will be made happy? Ryan, I didn't want to tell you, but maybe the time has come. I loved your father very much, but he didn't love me back. Not because I was bad or he was bad. It was for an entirely different reason. Our parents didn't allow him to marry the girl he was deeply in love with, and despite everything, he hastily married me. I was the happiest person on earth when we got married. I rejoiced, dreamed, and eagerly awaited the day you would be born. Your father lived with me physically, but until his death, he was always thinking of that other girl. You can't imagine how painful it is to feel that you're not the one and only, but just a good mother and wife. That's why I often stayed at work, trying to forget. I earned diplomas and titles, but I could never attain the most important thing, shared love. So please forgive me, son, if I wasn't able to give you enough motherly affection." Mrs. Anderson clutched her son's hand tightly and exhaled deeply. "Mom, why are you telling me this now? There was no reason before, and now, the time has come. I'm sorry. I've completely lost control," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "Everything will be fine," Mrs. Anderson reassured her, taking Ryan and Emma's hands and joining them together. She was about to approach the table to ask for the bill when Ethan's tall figure appeared behind her. "I have 2 pieces of news for you, dear parents." "Grandma, pardon?" "Let me start with the good news. My carefully chosen bride, Crystal, is leaving to study in London. Therefore, the wedding is cancelled. And by her wish, the second piece of news is even better. Laura and I want to get married again. This time for sure. To clarify, we want to get married, not just have an outrageously expensive wedding. Who's in favor? Raise your hand. Ryan, Emma, and Grandma all raised their hands without saying a word, and the environment felt with laughter for all. Finally, there was complete understanding in their home.